Hey everybody, this is Ryan McClanahan with HistoryThroughCards.com. Hope you're all doing very well today. I came across a really interesting card of a parakeet of all things, found in the 1888 N37 Allen and Ginter set. I was not aware of this prior to watching a video of Ryan Nolan, and he actually showed this card. And what was really interesting about this is that I know this bird, not personally, obviously, because the Carolina parakeet has been extinct since 1937 at least, if not longer. The last one to have died in captivity was 1918. And I love birds, I love animals, I always have. And I'm really fascinated by extinct species. And today I wanted to tell you a little bit more about the Carolina parakeet and um, what they plan on doing for this specific species, the reintroduction of it. And I'll go through the pros and the cons after I read this article to you about reintroducing extinct species or other species into the mix here that haven't gone extinct. Because it's a really interesting topic, something that I really haven't explored on this channel yet. And this is like a non-sports set that I think a lot of people really don't pay too much attention to. And the Birds of America is a 50 card set that was issued by Allen and Ginter in 1888. And what makes it really interesting here is that the Carolina parakeet was still alive and in apparently either great numbers, according to some sources, or very rare in other sources. So we'll get to this article, and then afterwards I'll continue and talk about what I think about this. I think you're going to find this really interesting. So here we go. This is from Forbes magazine. Scientists sequenced the genome of the Carolina parakeet, America's extinct native parrot, by Keona M. Smith, December 13th, 2019. Not very long ago, wild parrots lived in the forests of New York. The brightly colored birds squawked among the treetops of old-growth riverine forests and swamps from Florida to New York and as far east as Colorado, gathering in flocks of hundreds at a time. Today, the great vociferous flocks are gone, and the bright green, red, and yellow plumage can be seen only in museums. The last known Carolina parakeet was born sometime around 1883 and died in the Cincinnati Zoo in 1918. In the same ill-fated cage where the world's last passenger pigeon had died in 1914. Inca, the last Carolina parakeet, had outlived his mate, Lady Jane, by around a year, and as far as anyone knew, the pair had outlived their wild relatives by nearly a decade. No one had reported a credible sighting of a wild Carolina parakeet since 1910. The Carolina parakeet has been extinct for roughly a century, and a new genetic study pins the blame squarely on humans. The last stand of America's parrots. As European settlers and their descendants pushed westward in the 1700s and 1800s, they cleared many of the forests the Carolina parakeet had once called home. They also shot the birds in droves to keep them away from grain fields and to collect their bright feathers for ladies' hats. The Carolina parakeet made an easy target. Flocking instinct would bring large numbers of birds back to the scene of a fresh kill, giving hunters another shot at them. By the mid 1800s, Carolina parakeets were rare outside of the swamps of Florida, and by 1900 they couldn't be found anywhere else. But even in their last bastion of habitat, Carolina parakeets seemed to be doing pretty well under the circumstances. Farmers had stopped hunting them because they turned out to be useful for keeping cockleburs in check. The Carolina parakeet was one of the only animals who could survive eating the poisonous plant, although the toxic glucoside accumulated in the bird's flesh and made them deadly prey. Cats who ate Carolina parakeets usually died soon after. A naturalist described large flocks with plenty of young birds and good access to nesting sites. And then, abruptly, the Carolina parakeet simply vanished. A century later, ecologists still don't understand what happened. Maybe, some say, the species wasn't faring as well as it looked from the outside. Population decline and habitat loss could have left them with a limited gene pool, doomed to fade away before too long. But maybe, others argue, the Carolina parakeet would have just been fine if they hadn't been exposed in their last refuge. A deadly poultry diseases like Newcastle disease from nearby farms. If this is true, the very fact that the Carolina parakeet was finally tolerated to roam in the vicinity of human settlements proved its undoing, wrote the Audubon Society a few years ago. There's no actual evidence to support the poultry disease hypothesis. No eyewitness reports of sick parrots with symptoms of something like Newcastle disease, and no smoking gun in the form of pathogen samples from a preserved parrot corpse. But a new study published in the journal Current Biology sequenced the Carolina parakeet genome for the first time and searched for signs of inbreeding or population decline and found none. That means the species wasn't doomed long before disappearance, which means something must have tipped the balance. Solving a cold case. Evolutionary biologist Carles Lazula Fox and colleagues sampled nuclear DNA from the tibia, that's the shin bone, and toe pads of a Carolina parakeet killed and stuffed in the late 1800s and now owned by a private collector in Spain. They used the genome of the extinct species' closest living relative, a South American parrot called the sun parakeet, or sun conure, as a reference to help them map the genome and understand what the sequence of adenine, thymine, guanine, and cysteine meant for the bird's actual physiology. Demographic declines leave specific signals in the genomes of the species, explained Lazula Fox in a statement to the press. If members of a species have spent several generations breeding with close genetic relatives, or if the overall breeding population was too small, geneticists can spot the signs in an organism's genome. But the Carolina parakeet's genome had none of those warning signs, so its sudden extinction wasn't the end of a much longer decline. Something new had happened, and the odds are good that it was our fault. That lends some support to the poultry disease idea, although it's a long way from actually proving that the sick chickens, and not some other problem, actually killed off the Carolina parakeets. Meanwhile, Lozula Fox and colleagues say that the same process they used to look for signs of population decline in the Carolina parakeet genome could also help screen living species for warning signs and maybe solve more extinction cold cases too. The genomic study also solved another century-old mystery. How did the Carolina parakeet live on poisonous cockleburrs when their toxins even made the bird's flesh too poisonous to eat? In the Carolina parakeet's genome, Lazula Fox and colleagues found two proteins that interact with the toxic glucoside in cockleburrs. They suggest that those proteins allowed the bird to safely enjoy its toxic treats. So I looked into this a little bit more, and it looks like there were two different subspecies of this parrot, and or people call these parakeets, and they're not actually parakeets. When I think of a parakeet, I think of a budgigar. So there's two different subspecies, and one was really kind of a native to the East Coast, all the way through Florida up through New York. and the other one was really situated in the western part of the country, the Midwest through Colorado, and it's that specific subspecies that died out first. It looks like around maybe like 1910 or so, and then the last known sighting of this bird was in 1938 by a person who well, who knows a lot about birds, I just say. And so the whole species is gone. And I think the closest living relatives, there's actually three. The article says at least one, but there's three. And the Nanadaya parakeet and the Nande parakeet and the sun conure. I think they're all very closely related to the Carolina parakeet. I think it would be really neat to have a Carolina parakeet. There is a lot of questions here, though, whether or not you want to bring something like this back or any extinct species. And one thing you have to think about is what's the ethics behind bringing back an extinct species? Is the species truly extinct, like the thylacine, or is the thylacine actually extinct? Because I know it's a different species altogether, but there are a lot of thylacine or Tasmanian tiger sightings every year, and in that case, the thylacine went extinct in 1937, about the same time as our bird here. I'm not entirely convinced that the thylacine is extinct. Some people say that they still live on in Java, um, or other places around there, and not just New Zealand. No, it's a different animal altogether. But we see a lot of new species every year. Seemingly, a new species almost every day pops up, or there are species that are declared extinct, and then they end up being alive the entire time, and we just don't notice them. A few examples. One of the biggest one I think is the coelacanth, and there are two different species of coelacanth, and that was first rediscovered in 1938, and they thought that the coelacanth was extinct with the dinosaurs, in fact. Another one is the black-naped pheasant pigeon. Pheasant pigeon. And they're two different things, pheasants and pigeons. Anyway, they combined one bird into a pheasant pigeon, apparently. But they hadn't seen the the black-naped pheasant pigeon in about 140 years. So some species are just so rare, and we don't really know anything about them. And that's another thing about bringing back an extinct species like the dodo bird. And it's, as cool as it sounds to bring back a dodo, we don't know anything about them. We don't know anything about what they ate. We don't know anything about their environment, what they ate, and how they interacted with other species. So if you bring back a extinct species, say like the woolly mammoth, which I know that they want to do, I think that's ridiculous. And they want to do it for reasons of, I guess, climate change, which is probably the dumbest reason I've ever heard in my life. They want to bring those back up to Siberia. That's a whole different story, but I think it's a really dumb reason to bring something back. Um, Trying to preserve nature is one thing, and I fully support it. But reintroducing another species could harm other species in ways that we don't know anything about, and we don't know a whole lot about certain species at all because they're so rare to begin with. So I think that morality here kind of plays a part in this. The ethics of bringing back a species from extinction also is something that we have to look at. The other thing I was thinking about too is that, okay, so say you brought back the parakeet here, the Carolina parakeet. Is that fair to the animal? We don't know anything about its behavior at this point because these birds have been extinct officially since 1937, and they really weren't seen, you know, 50 years prior to that either. So, um, is it fair to the animal to do this? And they always seem to be very tight knit, as this article suggests. That if one flew in to see what was going on with its dead buddy, everybody just kind of came in, and they'd all get picked off. And um, that's a trait that you don't usually find with animals to begin with. But birds are different. Parrots are a lot different because they're a very social animal, kind of like us. And I don't know if this is the right thing to do to bring back these species like this until we find out more about them and their behavior, and not just what they ate. And what are you gonna do? Put it in a cage? I just don't know. This isn't a fish. Uh, you know, you really need to look at the morality of bringing back an extinct species like this, specifically parrots. I'm just thinking about this. I think there needs to be a lot more thought involved before we start playing God here. Just because you can do something doesn't mean that you should. And again, trying to conserve rare species is something that I support, and um, it doesn't mean that like we should bring back all species. Um, and we should really kind of look at it. I'm not talking about Jurassic Park type stuff here because that's not going to ever happen. At least I hope not. I don't want to have to see T-Rex outside my window. That would suck for us. To tell you the truth, if it was dinosaurs, we wouldn't be here, obviously. But bringing back like a saber-toothed cat would not be good either, or anything like that. And the farther back you go, in time, say like 10,000 plus years ago during the Ice Age, you have all those megafauna, and now we're finding out that most of those megafauna uh, became extinct for reasons that didn't really have to do with mankind, because at the same time that the megafauna were going extinct is the same time that we had a series of asteroid impacts, and the Clovis culture all of a sudden disappears as well. And that we also have about 21 to 23 species of hominids that have also disappeared as well. Neanderthals famously have disappeared, and there's about, I think, maybe about 7% of our DNA is Neanderthal. Are there species that you would like to have seen brought back from extinction, or kind of like the Carolina parakeet? What would you guys think about that? For me, I'm not entirely sure that's the right thing to do. Um, again, because once you take out a species from its environment, other species comes in. And again, too, like pigeons are not they're not native to America, neither are house finches. And those things wake me up at like 4 o'clock in the morning, and man, it's not a good scene. Uh, so there are other non-native species that have made their homes in America, and one of those actually is two species of parrots. So the one is a Quaker parrot, and Quaker parrots, they you can find those in New York City and throughout the eastern United States. They originally came, I believe, from Mexico or South America in the 1970s, and they've been here for like 40 plus years now. And a lot of people consider them pests. It's actually illegal to own a Quaker parrot in New Jersey because New Jersey, um, the state considers Quaker parrots to be very dangerous because they make their nests in electrical lines, and they can cause fires. So they've made those parrots illegal to own. And then in New York City, the parrots also have made a home there as well, which I find very interesting that you would have a South American parrot make its home in year round in a place that's cold and snowy like New York or New Jersey. So you also have too the Mexican red-crowned parrot. They have those in Los Angeles and in parts of, I believe, New Mexico and Arizona as well. They've made their homes. And in that case, though, um, there's more of those parrots in the United States than there are in Mexico. So some people feel that if the Mexican parrot disappears, and then they'll have the parrots here in the United States. Some people like them. Some people think they're annoying because they squawk quite a bit. And if anybody has had a parakeet or a parrot or a cockatiel, you guys know exactly how loud that some of these guys get. But I always loved parakeets, parrots, and birds and animals in general. And for me, not having an animal for as long as I have now, like 20 years, I haven't had an animal outside of a fish. To me, that's not kind of natural to how I grew up. I always grew up with animals, and I've always had parakeets, and I had a crazy cockatiel, which I absolutely loved. Maybe someday I'll get another cockatiel. I don't know because when we kind of tend to forget that the lifespan of many pets is not as long as ours. So when we get attached to our pets and then they pass away, it can be very difficult to want to get another animal because you feel like you're replacing the old animal, and so that's how I feel. Maybe someday I'll get another parakeet or a cockatiel or something. But in the meantime, I really wanted to tell you guys about this. I thought this was a really interesting card that I saw. I've never seen it before, and it must have made a great impression on somebody at Allen and Ginter to have included this parrot in the card set because it's the only extinct animal that I'm aware of that is actually on a card from the time that it was not extinct, if that makes any sense. So again, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it as always. Let me know what you think about anything that I've talked about here. Again, uh, is it the moral thing to do to bring back an extinct animal? And which animal would you want to bring back? For me personally, I want the thylacine to come back. I still kind of think that there are some thylacines, just not in New Zealand. I have no problem bringing back certain animals. The woolly mammoth, absolutely not. There's no need to bring back a woolly mammoth at all. I'm not entirely sure, again, if some of these things should be brought back. But again, I'd love to hear what you guys have to say. And again, thank you so much for stopping by. I greatly appreciate it. As always, like and subscribe for more interesting content. And I will talk to you later. Have a good one. Bye.